Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. We had a little live stream on Wednesday and it went very well. So, going to be putting out live streams which will go to YouTube and all the usual places. We did one as a test on Wednesday. Got quite a few people in straight away, actually, so I'll be carrying that on. I think Wednesdays is going to be the day for that. I'm also going to be doing some stuff with Eric von Essex on Thursdays. And yes, again, streamed live. So I'm looking forward to that. I've actually met up with some people recently who have some amazing information. And down at our talk in Hereford, I've met somebody who has looked at the timeline of the human race, where we all came from, what it's all about, all the interesting stuff. So I'm going to be covering that in a little series in the new year. I've also been working on the Heretics of Smithfield. Please do support us on Patreon, because I'm putting that film out in March and all our patrons will get free entry to any screenings, a copy of the film and guided tours. It's all going to be quite exciting. Had a little bit of a disaster over the past couple of days, which was the loss of a lot of data. And if there's anyone out there who is good at recovering data, please do get in touch, because I've lost a fair amount due to Windows, actually, not me, but Windows 10 and its updates, which I've read are very good at destroying files. Well, I've had a lot of files destroyed, including some masters I was working on. So that's kind of kept me busy over the last day or so with things that are of no real importance, but I had to get on with. And yes, I'm thinking of doing a live stream on Boxing Day, actually. Boxing Day. So yeah, 9 p.m. in the evening. If you're bored on Boxing Day, I think we'll be doing a live stream. So, yes, I also wanted to talk a little bit about our forthcoming talks. Yes, myself and also with Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams. We're continuing our real Citizens Assembly as these Citizens Assemblies are being rolled out and becoming more draconian, and the public are basically turkeys voting for Christmas. That's a kind of seasonal way of interpreting it. But yes, the Sanity Tour 2020, the real Citizens Assembly. Yes, just to give you an idea of what it's about. They decide your future. Who are they? We're going to tell you about that. Global policies bypass national government. We're going to tell you how that's done. Probably you've got a bit of a clue already if you've been listening to the shows. The climate of change is driven by global policy. It's not the weather. You try telling that to the majority of the population. Maybe some of them will believe you. Everything you need to know but were never told. Join us and get the bigger picture at our event. It's essential information. Yes, it is. And we do Q&As and we often have a meet-up after in a pub or a little restaurant, and we chat to people and exchange information. I love exchanging information. There's nothing like it. Yes, on Saturday, 18th of January in Salford, that's just me, Mark Winders. The real Citizens Assembly hits the Racecourse Hotel, and it's Littleton Road, Salford, M73SE. We're going to start at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and it's our friends Angie Wright and Steve Watson in Manchester who are arranging that for us, and I would really like everyone to turn up who's in Manchester. That would be fantastic, because we had a good day last time. We did a bit of an impromptu one, actually, and Steve booked a little club round the corner, and we had a few regular listeners to the show. It was so last minute, I thought no one was going to turn up, but they actually did, which was great. So yeah, the real Citizens Assembly with me, 2:30 p.m. at the Racecourse Hotel, Littleton Road, Salford, M73SE, and you can book for that by going to windowsontheworld.net. But best thing is, for that one, turn up on the day, pay on the door. Saturday the 25th of January, Myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams, we're in Gwynedd in North Wales in Fairborn. Fairborn is a place that has been earmarked for managed retreat. Yes, that means depopulation over the next 30 to 40 years because of, guess what, rising sea levels that, guess what, aren't going to rise. So they don't need to keep going on about sea defences all the time. This will not happen. We have the world's leading expert in sea levels, Niels Axelmorner. We did a show on that. If you go to the Fairborn Bigger Picture on Facebook, you'll see a video of me talking about it, introducing the subject, and then you'll get the excellent information from Niels Axelmorner, everything you need to know as to why you don't have to move away from the coast. Yeah, so there you go. Hey, 22nd of February, Worthing, East Sussex, venue to be announced. There's an Eventbrite bookings page at windowsontheworld.net. That's Wednesday, 22nd of February. Sorry, not Wednesday, the 22nd of February, Worthing, East Sussex. And that's go to the Eventbrite bookings page on windowsontheworld.net. Yes, little thought for you before we start. The more laws, the less justice. That was Marcus Tullius Cicero. Democracy always leads to debt, bankruptcy and chaos. That was Plato. 10% of the people think, 10% think they think, and 80% would rather die than think. That's Mark Twain. That was sent to me earlier on today by Edmund in Hereford. And then he puts in brackets, this explains why democracy does not work. Well, there's a new form of democracy. It's a totalitarian form of democracy, and it's being rolled out everywhere. Britain is one of the biggest guinea pigs. We've declared a climate emergency. We're going to become carbon neutral. We're going to give up our cars. We're going to live in smart cities, and we're going to be ruled by an oligarchy. No change there then. Okay. Well, this is also a point that Edmund made. I've been discussing the rise of populism for 2 years as a revolt against the status quo, which is leading to a lurch to the fringes of political opinion. The clarion call for people everywhere demanding change is, what about me? Well, what about you? Well, it's all about you because it's all about emotion and feeling over fact. Now, this rise of populism is very interesting, and a lot of people say that's why Trump was elected. That's why we're seeing sort of changes happening in Europe. People are getting sick of being told what to do, and guess what? They're being demonised as far right and extremists and Nazis for thinking for themselves. Who would have thought? Well, the governance system responds by controlling the narrative and calling it populism. So everything has to be owned in this new system. Language has to be owned. Now, I've just been sent a link from the BBC. I couldn't open it because I wouldn't sign in. I don't agree with signing into things for the BBC. I haven't heard what they have to say, but I can predict what they did say. Get an earload of this. Rana Mitter looked at the ideologies surrounding climate disaster. Wait a minute. Climate disaster? It was climate change a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Then it was a climate emergency. Then it was global heating, and now it's a climate disaster. I wonder who brought this into the public. Well, it was actually the intelligence services who told The Guardian, and The Guardian then put it out there because The Guardian is merely a rag for global governance lobbying. I don't know whether you knew that, but yes, it is. And people would say, why would they choose such stupid and deranged fact-free journalists? Well, I think I've just answered my own question. So it's gone from an emergency to a disaster. It's gone from warming to heating. The assumptions are that they're assumptions, aren't they? The psychology of crowds, the steering of opinion, the appeals to emotion over fact. Yes, Brainwashing Britain, title of tonight's show. Self-identity and the obsession with it has become one of the great tools to control and manage population. The use of the word indigenous now refers to those who are disingenuous, puppets of the controlled narrative. And we've covered this. What about the tribal elders, those idiots in costumes working for the UN who go around music festivals talking about their connection to the earth? Yes, useful idiots and implementers of global governance. Fascists, Nazis, fascist scum off our streets, fascist scum off our streets. Yes, we have reported on the use of the so-called indigenous, which is now a definition of someone who is playing the role of an identitarian for political and social engineering purposes only. So the real people of indigenous origins never get a word in, do they? That's interesting. They just get the UN turning up in their country, telling them what to do, along with hundreds of NGOs. We've covered that in the past as well. So yeah, they are actually destroying their countries for third-party interests, these so-called tribal elders and indigenous clowns. Identitarians dictate the diversity and empowerment agenda. These words have become the most used in all public organisations and across the corporate world. The UK at the present time is the most limited in its language and outlook than it has ever been. Go back 200 years and look what people were talking about. They weren't saying vibrant, diversity and inclusive in every couple of sentences. Going to get onto that now. So welcome everybody to Vibrant Britain, the home of a government which succumbs to the New World management system and pretends that it is democratic. Yes, they argue over benches in the House of Commons, but they let George Soros take over Citizens Assemblies. How could that happen? Interesting, eh? In the original meaning of the word, it would be laughable. Vibrant just means something else. Vibrant actually means very, very, very dull. In ancient Greece, a court would be held and the crime would be played out as it was said to have happened by both parties, and analysis of each side of the story would come from this public investigation. So in other words, where were you when this person said that they hit you? Where were the other people around the room? What happened? Who were the witnesses? Where did you fall? Did you fall over, or were you hit before you fell? These are the sort of things that would be kind of brought up in the ancient courts of Greece. Can you imagine that now? Would not happen, would it? It just wouldn't happen. So, yes, we have thought crimes now, you see, and people can believe things happen to them and do not have to prove loss when they say their feelings were hurt. And a friend of mine became the victim of this, a victim of somebody who pretended that they had been assaulted and, due to the vast amount of alcohol they'd been drinking, fell over. Oh, they're on painkillers as well, and they had several epileptic fits. And they said that they'd been hit despite the prosecution witnesses not seeing an assault. Yes, that's what happens in Britain, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm living proof of it. I've been looking into that case for 3 years. Then guess what? Loads of other cases came forward. Imagine if we could do what they did in ancient Greece and actually act out the crime. Yes, it would be a lot easier. However, let's get back into what we were talking about. We have thought crimes. People can believe things happen to them and do not have to prove loss when they say their feelings were hurt. Very important point. What was your loss? What's your claim here? Oh, you claim to have hurt feelings. I see. Well, we better look into it. This is a very important management tool. The disempowered and nanny state controlled mind is very easy to manage. No one has the right to an opinion if it is perceived as a thought crime. We were talking about this earlier on, and it's such an important point, one we've gone into before, I know. This sort of thing would have been laughed out of court in ancient Greece, of course, but we're not in ancient Greece, are we? No, we're in brainwashed Britain. So how many of the population still have their own minds? This is the question. We have quite a few of them listening, actually, and we have some in chat. And hello to Eric von Essex, and of course Monthly Blimpton, who always put extremely challenging and thought-provoking, but mainly humorous and very silly comments in. We don't get many people commenting in the chat box, but we get thousands of people listening later on when the shows go up. So it'd be nice to have a few more in there, but I actually don't promote the shows that much. So I think this new live stream idea will be really good. And if you would like to come on the show, get in touch, because it's very easy to do. I think more of this sort of thing would be good, because the people who listen to the show have a lot of interesting stuff to say, and I get sent so many interesting emails. And when I start conversing with people, all this information comes back. And yeah, thanks to Jill in Oxford for all the stuff about the Citizens Assembly in Oxford. I know Jill's not very well tonight, so if you're listening, Jill, get well soon and Merry Xmas and all that. And let's just see what's in chat before we crack on with the meat and potatoes of tonight's show. The Guardian is expensive toilet paper. Well, I think most people read it online now, so it's not expensive, but it is time wasting. I'm thinking of loading Windows 7 over XP. Well, that's probably a good idea. Windows 7 was quite stable, unlike the disaster that I've just had over the past couple of days. So, yeah, let's have a look. Let's go back. We're very busy tonight in chat, you two. Windows 10 is awful. Lumpy, slow, creepy. Linux Ubuntu is years ahead. Well, I've got a Linux computer in front of me. But for my editing, I'd still use Windows. I've got a Mac as well. Yes, I've been travelling so much. I've been doing my editing on the road. So yes, okay, yes, greetings. Rewilding is causing a split between Pip Archer and her business partner in the Archers. Really? I didn't know that. Fascinating what you learn in chat, isn't it? So let's get back to the meat and potatoes of the show. Oh, I said meat, sorry about that. I'm not being carbon neutral, am I really? I want to give you an example of how things have fallen from opengovernmentpartnership.org. They had an Open Government Summit. Oh, that must be all right. It says Open Government. Wait a minute, that's a bit like Open Society, isn't it? I think there might be a bit of a contradiction going on here. But basically, yes, that links up. The Open Government Summit also featured the Soros Open Society Network. And it was a brilliant example of how the new dystopia, dressed as Newtopia, works. Everything talked about seems to be along the lines of all the template consensus rolled out. The new governance system is all about using very simple methods of steering public opinion and recruiting useful idiots to impose policy, which is exactly what citizens' assemblies are for. Now, Sanjay Pradhan's rallying cry, he's the CEO of this organisation, Open Government Partnership. He made a speech which you can see on YouTube. It was at the OGP Global Summit before 2,000 plus leaders and activists from 100 countries. This is the point, isn't it? Activists. Remember that it was 20,000 paid activists that got the whole climate change thing moving and got the world's cameras onto Rio in '92. All bought and paid for by Maurice Strong. And of course, probably with a few quid thrown in by Edmund de Rothschild. See our show we did the other week, The Man Who Saw the Future. When we play the video of George Hunt talking about what happened in 1987 and the fact that people still haven't cottoned on to what's going on, they go, oh my God. Because at the end of it, he says, I'm hoping that this will light the fires of indignation and people will rise up against these people who are trying to take away your life, liberty, freedom and everything else. It hasn't happened yet. Anyway, let's get back to this. YouTube and their new website, Reinvigorate Democracy, right? Their website says, Reinvigorate Democracy, we must collectively rise to the challenge. This is at this global summit. Sanjay Pradhan, who's the CEO of opengovernmentpartnership.org, which I've been looking into, which is linked into the Citizens Assembly stuff. Funny how this stuff all links together, isn't it, into the same mush of hive mind. Now, Sanjay is a very simple type of robot. He cannot complete a sentence without using empowering somewhere in the sentence. Anywhere will do. He's not fussy, as long as he says empowering every single line. Have a look at the video. It's absolutely brilliant as an example of a puppet, a badly programmed puppet as well. And yes, it's on that site, the opengovernmentpartnership.org. Now, he must have a random empowerment generator, Sanjay, which needs a service, as it's repeating itself every 20 seconds, when once or twice a minute would be enough to say diversity, wouldn't it? You know, even for the most repetitive change agent. But being diverse and vibrant, he can't stand the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, but he really likes George Soros. He refers to their steering committee. Isn't it funny how all these subversive change agent organisations have steering committees? And he finishes his speech to give the platform to Open Society and their president. That's George Soros, Open Society. But isn't it a coincidence how they all link up, these organisations? Now, let's get into the psychological drivers of policy. We're going to look at a public engagement document, which was from Princeton.EduSystem Files Research Documents. It's a PDF. It's a psychological brainwashing document, and I thought it fit in very well with what's going on in the UK at the moment. In fact, it's the basis of what's going on in the UK at the moment. It's called Improving Public Engagement with Climate Change. 5 best practice insights from psychological science, and it goes back to 2015, does this paper. It says psychologists generally distinguish between 2 separate sources of normative influence, namely descriptive and prescriptive social norms. This came from the minds of Deutsch and Gerard in 1955, it says here. Whereas prescriptive norms contain information on how people ought to behave, the descriptive norms simply describe how others are behaving. That was by Caldini et al. In 1990. Another source for you there. When activated and aligned, though, social norms can serve as powerful sources of influence. Here we go. For example, the more people hear social references and talk about the risk of climate change, and the more climate change is viewed within one's social network as a risk that requires action, the more it amplifies an individual's own risk perception and intention to act. Simple propaganda through repetition. That's all they're saying here. And what's happened? Simple propaganda through repetition. Didn't you know there was a climate emergency? What's the matter with you? Have you not been reading The Guardian? Have you not listened to the BBC? I wondered where it all came from. I thought it was just the weather. Let's carry on with this. In short, social norms and context play an important role in human decision making. So, consensus results, and 97% of us agree. That's what happens, isn't it? It says, for example, research has consistently shown negative effect to be one of the strongest drivers of climate change, risk perceptions and policy. Let me say this again. I think you need to hear this. In short, how we feel about a given situation often has a potent influence on our decisions about how to respond. In case you wanted to know, that's from Slovic and Peters, 2006. Well, that's the Gail Bradbrook School of Critical Thinking. People respond to belief and emotion over fact. Isn't that what she says? And she's not been changed, has she? She's got her own mind. Well, she has. She's got her own mind, hasn't she? No, she's into the lostness of the mind, the wilderness of the mind. That's all that these people are promoting, the wilderness of the mind. Yeah, so treat them like children and they will respond like children. I think that's the psychology that's going on here. It says public policymakers should try to appeal to both the analytical and experiential processing system and expect that public support for action will require highlighting relevant personal experiences through recall, scenarios, and powerful narratives and metaphors. Marx et al. 2007, in case you were interested. So, what we have here is psychological steering into emotion and belief over fact. So that document came out in 2015, and that's exactly what's happened. It says here, in short, information about climate change risks need to be translated into relatable and concrete personal experiences. Confusing weather with climate, talking to the survivors of extreme weather events and leading them into the belief system of, yes, catastrophobia. There's a climate emergency. We had really bad weather. Oh, there was a bit of a tsunami. Oh, there was some catastrophic rainfall. Nothing unusual, but, it's global warming, it's climate change, isn't it? So the tribal elders who say they are being forced off their land through climate change when it is in fact climate change policy. That's what I was getting to at the beginning of the show. These useful idiots who come on, who say that, oh my God, there's going to be loads of climate refugees. Well, climate refugees, not from man-made global warming, but from the occasional tsunami or very heavy storm or such like. That does happen, yes. Mudslides, who needs them? Yeah, they're dangerous, aren't they? The tribal elders, who are being forced off their land through climate change, when it's in fact climate change policy. Now, When you can't pay, we take away your land. That's what these people are actually playing into. It's not the weather, it's the World Bank. It's the World Wildlife Fund, a land-grabbing organisation, and the Global Environmental Facility that we talked about a few weeks ago, lending your government money to mitigate against what will never happen. When you can't pay, we take it away. Your land, that is. That was the genius idea of Edmund de Rothschild, 1992. And of course, the World Bank are trustees of the Global Environmental Facility, who lend money to countries so they can mitigate against climate change, so they can stop building coal-powered fire stations, so they can invest in renewables which don't work. And then, guess what? The land is taken as collateral. Everybody wins. Well, World Bank win. Like next year's World Wilderness Conference 11 in India. Shame on you, all you tribal indigenous elders who are working for the UN. Shame on you. So basically, let's get back now to this document on how to get people to believe in global warming. Framing the big picture. Nobody likes losing, but everyone likes gaining. Oh, I see. A bit of the old think and grow rich mentality here coming in, I think. Think a bit of the old self-empowerment. It's all about me, but really, I'm new age. Framing the big picture. Nobody likes losing, but everyone likes gaining. What a rather limited philosophical argument. Oh, there's no philosophy here. We're talking about psychology, aren't we? Are you getting a picture of the mindset of the creators of this document yet? I think you might be. The death of philosophical and critical thinking. Well, critical thinking and philosophy were before their time. Psychology kind of wipes out philosophy, really, doesn't it? In my view, anyway. Much of the media, scientific and policy discourse, it says here, around climate change has consistently invoked the idea of losses. For example, climate solutions are often framed as an immediate loss for society, e.g. higher taxes, reducing energy consumption. Yet, long-standing behavioural research has shown that people psychologically evaluate gains and losses in fundamentally different ways. For example, prospect theory, here we go, another quote, Kahneman and Tversky in 1979 demonstrates that people are more risk-seeking in lost domains than they are in gain domains. In particular, they're more reluctant to take action when losses are paired with uncertainty. Tversky and Shafir, 1992, in case you're interested. In other words, when climate change impacts are framed as potential, i.e. uncertain, losses in the distant future, then it's not as effective as where climate change solutions are framed as certain losses for society at present. That's where your climate emergency comes from. It encourages people to conclude that maintaining the status quo may be worth the gamble. Policy implications. Let's have a look what it says here. These psychological insights suggest that shifting the policy conversation from the potentially negative future consequences of not acting, which is a loss, on climate change to the positive benefits or gains of immediate action is likely to increase support. So in other words, give us all your money, we'll mitigate against it. That's going to make you feel good. That's what we talk about, the new form of benefice, carbon taxation, loss of all rights, implementation of draconian policies, living in smart cities, giving up your car, giving up plane travel. This is all a benefice because it's a religion. But conversely, it's all been psychologically worked out too. Everybody wins. In fact, it says here, in comparison with negative loss scenarios, positive gain frames have shown to increase pro-environmental attitudes and support for mitigation. There you go, and adaptation policies. Now, this is coming out of the mind of psychologists. So basically, climate change is a psychological warfare initiative, right? I'm going to read that again because this is fantastic stuff. In fact, in comparison with negative loss scenarios, positive gain frames have shown to increase pro-environmental attitudes and support for mitigation and adaptation policies. That's Hurlston, Lewandowski, Newell and Sewell, 2014. And as if you didn't know, Spence and Pigeon, 2010. So This is incredible, isn't it? So in other words, it doesn't matter about the facts. The facts never mattered. It's about how to get you to accept it and feel good, which is what we've been talking about for the past several years. And here we have living proof as to how it's been implemented. So we have to act now. There's a climate emergency, but if we accept control and management of all previous inalienable rights, we will save the world. There you go. Do you feel better now? Well, according to psychologists, you should do. You see, it's all planned out. Well, you knew there wasn't really an emergency, didn't you? Let's get into the next section. 5. Playing the long game. Tapping the potential of human motivation. Psychologists generally distinguish between two separate sources of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic, whereas the former, extrinsic, mainly relies on external incentives to produce motivation to change, e.g. monetary incentives. The latter draws on personal and internal processes. Ooh, can you see what's going on here? The appeal to emotion. Yes, in contrast to the predominant assumption among many policymakers that people are inherently or rationally motivated by money. That was Miller, 1999. I love this. It's all written down. All the sources are here, you know. It says a large body of psychological research has illustrated that this is not necessarily the case. Many people intrinsically care about the well-being of others and the environment. Stern, Dietz, Abel, Guagnano and Koloff, 1999. Accordingly, recent experiments have shown that appealing to people's intrinsic motivational needs can be a more effective and long-lasting driver of pro-environmental behaviour. And guess who that's by? Boldajik, Steg, Geller, Lehman and Postmus, 2013, and van der Linden in 2015. There are two main reasons for this, it carries on. In comparison, extrinsic incentives only tend to work for as long as they can be maintained. Second, external rewards can actually undermine, i.e. crowd out people's intrinsic motivation to change. Deci, Costner and Ryan, 1999. Isn't it a good job we have psychologists to help to steer us into what's best for us, boys and girls, and anyone in between? So, conclusion, it says here. This memo describes 5 best practice insights from psychological science to help improve public decision-making about climate change. You're being psychologically steered, everybody. It says, we argue that climate change has traditionally been framed as an analytical, temporarily and spatially distant risk that represents an uncertain future loss. For psychological research suggests that in order to improve public engagement with the issue, policymakers should emphasise climate change as an experiential, local and present risk. Citizens Assemblies, that's why they're having them. Define and leverage relevant social group norms. Highlight the tangible gains associated with immediate action. Our house is on fire. That would make you kind of get into some immediate action, wouldn't it? Our house is on fire. Act now. Tell the truth. So, highlight the tangible gains associated with immediate action, and last but certainly not least, appeal to long-term motivators of pro-environmental behaviour and decision-making. Your change agents, your lobbyists, your idiots like George Monbiot, the entire editorial and staff section of the UK Guardian. Incredible, isn't it? So now you know how, why and by who you were being psychologically steered. I think I'll just give you the name of that paper again, because it was something that I just came across. It's called Improving Public Engagement with Climate Change. 5 Best Practiced Insights from Psychological Science in 2015. Now, that was quite a revelation to me, because it it reinforced what I've been saying about how they're doing it. But it's nice to have the sources, isn't it? And all the authors and all the social engineers that steered us into the way we are. Well, maybe the way some people are. Now let's get on to Citizens Assemblies. Please watch our show. Citizens Assemblies We've done 2 on Citizens Assemblies, the end of democracy, and we did one called Britain Shamed into Stupidity. Questions from the Oxford Citizens Assembly. We did cover this, but I want to update you on what's actually going on. It said, currently national policy does not require that new homes are built to net zero standards. These were basically what the people of Oxford, well, some people in Oxford were steered into. And I think they got this through with a majority of something like 19. I think the others were not sure or didn't know what to vote. But basically, the outcome was that the majority have voted for the most draconian measures that were put on the table. Who'd have thought, eh? They weren't steered into that, were they? They weren't steered into that using that paper and psychological change agents. They can't have been. Surely not. That wouldn't happen in a democracy, would it? Would that happen in a democracy? No, of course it wouldn't, would it? Would it? So currently, national policy does not require that new homes are built to net zero standards. Should the government introduce this standard? I think they're voting in favour of that. The government has already legislated to end the sale of all petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2040. Should the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles be brought forward to 2030? A resounding yes. If you are a homeowner, would you be prepared to retrofit your home and bear the costs? Average £25,000 per house. Who would do this? They did. Now, good point here is this. A Citizens Assembly of 50 people had a small majority that voted in favour of that. That's what, 20 people? 20 to 30 people. How many people are there in Oxford, in Oxfordshire? There must be 300,000, 400,000, probably more. So how can the Citizens Assembly, which were handpicked and steered into the intended outcome, speak for the rest of Oxford? It's not a Citizens Assembly, is it, ladies and gentlemen? It's not a Citizens Assembly at all. So it said, if you are a tenant, would you be prepared to have your landlord retrofit your home paid for through your rent and lower energy bills like hell, right? There's no way energy bills are going down. They're going up massively. These are just facts. Over a number of years, average of £100 extra a month. You can bet it's going to be more than that. What, on top of council tax and all the rest of it. So they're hitting private landlords now. Private landlords have already been hit. So rents are going to go up. You're going to have more poverty, but you're going to save the world. 4. If more reuse and return schemes were introduced in supermarkets and other shops in the city, would you use them? Now, this is an incredible thing, right? Because I've talked about this to older people, and recycling was the norm 30 years ago. Because loads of glass bottles got sent back and reused. In fact, in most European countries, beer bottles just get sent back. They do this all over the world, right? Recycling is just common sense. But in the UK, no, you have to have 10 different bins and they have to charge you for it. You know what they also voted for in Oxford? Having smaller bins. You know, do you think these people were psychologically steered into this? Do you think they were pressured into this in any way at all? Because I have a feeling they might have been, you know. But anyway, top-level findings from the Assembly members include overall agreement that Oxford should seek to achieve net zero carbon earlier than the government's 2050 target. Who'd have thought? Broad agreement that Oxford, including its councils, other organisations, businesses and individuals, should be ambitious in making changes to accelerate the reduction of carbon emissions. Who'd have thought? The cost and any negative impact of change on the most disadvantaged in our community should be mitigated against. Well, I agree with that because I'm definitely, at the moment, one of the most disadvantaged in my community. I am, you know. And all this should be in my favour. I've decided the cost and any negative impact of change on the most disadvantaged like me should be mitigated against. So please help us on Patreon and, of course, go to the website. Great. But joking aside, just plead poverty and don't pay. This is the point, isn't it? How much can you have taken off you? Taxation is something which people seem to be proud of. Well, I pay my taxes, why shouldn't you? This is where you get all this stuff coming in like, ooh, these rich individuals putting their money in trust. Well, everyone should put their money in trust because you don't own anything anyway. These are basics. But of course, the public aren't given the real understanding of how the system works. It says information was key to Assembly members forming a view about the actions needed to cut carbon emissions. Yes, it was, because they were all brainwashed into it by lobbyists for global governance and climate change. Much more needs to be done to enable others across the city to gain a similar understanding of both the challenge and the solutions. So they're going to brainwash even more people. That's the whole idea. You're going to have pop-up community hubs everywhere, with useful idiots like Fahana Yarmin, who, if she manages to unsuperglue herself from the last building she glued herself to, can give you the legal framework of how we can implement climate change. Yes, they're already doing it. There was a pop-up place in Camden. I was sent all the details. They were telling people how vibrant and diverse they were. They were empowering women. They were empowering minorities. It was wonderful. But it seems to have closed down. Well, it's not open on a Sunday anyway. I walked past it today. So spread the mind virus, in other words. That's the message, isn't it? Spread the mind virus. The Citizens Assemblies, this is another thing, right? Very important, that hasn't been brought up. The Citizens Assemblies use Chatham House rules, according to the attached document that I saw, because it means that they can quote anybody, but they can't quote the person. Is that open to corruption? I think it might be, don't you? I mean, who's going to remember what anybody said? So, they record the meetings and they decide to use and cherry pick what the people have been steered into as the best quotes. Well, you would, wouldn't you? I suppose you would. The Oxford Assembly voted for retrofitting houses starting from £25,000 each. The psychological steering is through Delphi technique. Look it up. All your local council meetings are held using Delphi technique with facilitators, facilitating meetings, steering you into the intended outcome, and using psychology against you if you disagree. Check out sortition.org, which is involved, funded by George Soros, which is the government's chosen NGO, which is going to roll out the Citizens Assemblies in a town, city or village near you. And My Society. Look up sortition.org, Involve and My Society. A friend of ours wrote to the sortition.org, and they were saying that they were basically going to be set up as a charity, but they weren't charitable because they had political objectives, or were deemed to have. So they were trying to masquerade as a charity. Most of these things try and masquerade as charities these days. The psychological steering carries on. In 6 select committees decided on a George Soros-funded organisation involved to be chosen, the chosen organisation to roll out the Citizens Assemblies. Now that tells you something about what's happened in this country, because if the government are letting George Soros influence public opinion in this country above themselves, then maybe we're being governed by somebody else. We have been talking about this for some time. Yes, I've done several shows on this, and the info came in from the first Citizens Assembly on climate change in Oxford. More to come on this, but there is no climate emergency, nor any evidence for one, so calm down everyone. On what foundation evidence was a climate emergency declared? This is the question I keep asking. What was the foundation evidence for the climate emergency? Go and ask somebody that and see what they say. Ask these Extinction Rebellion people, and they couldn't really define it. One of them actually said to me, he said, "Don't you realise half the southern hemisphere is underwater?" I said, "No, it's 2/3 actually, always has been." Seminars hosted for staff of councils which validated the needs of policymakers. Seminars were hosted for staff of councils, right? And they validated the needs of the policymakers, the psychologists behind it all. Basically primed the useful idiots in your local council. So basically, they wanted to retro tax on the energy performance certificate. That's where the 25 grand comes in. You know the energy performance certificates, if you ever sold a house or bought one? You have this energy performance certificate, which for years lay dormant. And now it's coming to life to bite you. It's coming back to bite you. The programme rolled out was to encourage rationing and restriction of gas and electricity. Public transport was promoted to restrict and eventually ban private vehicles. Cycling promoted to restrict travel to highly localised journeys. Have you thought about this? I mean, I'm not anti-cycling. I'm anti-cycling lobbyists who have been psychologically steered into being fascists. Cyclists are fascist scum. Off our streets, fascist scum. Not all of them, of course, but I would say most of them. Lycra louts everywhere. Gangs of them. Hordes of them. It said, all food, services and goods arrive by road and diesel vehicles, right? These are facts. All local deliveries and tradesmen use vehicles. It puts the self-employed out of business and it ruins small business. That's what this does. And that's what people in Oxford are now saying. Closing the roads off, just like they did in Waltham Forest. Clyde Lokes, the useful idiot, who rolled out Mini Holland in Waltham Forest, one of the most unpopular things that's ever happened there, is now being touted as a brilliant idea. And have a look at the people who are advertising it on the Oxford livable streets. And also Google are controlling the comments on there. In other words, everybody is shadow banned from commenting. This is what democracy looks like. You know what? Years ago at Occupy, there was a change agent called Saskia Kent, and she had 12 Marxists and a dog around her. And she said, this is what democracy looks like. When we challenged this, 3 of them turned out to be what they call dragons and started shouting in our face and saying that we were no threat. Well, we weren't really threatening them. We were just trying to get them to come face to face with a few facts. But that is the new democracy. That's what she was talking about. Yes, basically this green infrastructure and safeguarding green spaces, the strategy for rewilding. It's all a land grab, closing off public land. That's what all this is about. Recycling tons of landfill. How are they going to achieve it? How are they going to do this? They want everyone to buy less meat and dairy produce. Buy all energy from 100% renewable sources. Well, that means you're not going to have any energy because renewable sources do not work. They're not going to work 100%. They account for less than 3% of the national grid. Less than 3% of the national grid is renewables. We were told by the people at the Green Energy Conference, the 2 companies which actually supply the national grid, Green Frog and AXA, told us independently, the future is massive power cuts, the national grid is at capacity, and the government know renewables don't work. Well, hang on. That was said in 92, wasn't it? That basically renewables aren't really going to work, but we're going to use them as a lever to land grab. I'm paraphrasing here, but that was the gist of it. How come our government are now imposing it? I wonder if it's been imposed from above. I think it could be, I really think it could be. Yes. So the UN IPCC, 12 years to reduce carbon output to avoid catastrophe. That was all put in there. And the UN report was commissioned by policymakers, of course, and steered by psychologists. They brought up the Paris Agreement to stay below 1.5% above pre-industrial levels, which you can't do. It's a load of rubbish. IPCC said heading towards 3% rise, leading to catastrophic consequences. Well, the IPCC wouldn't know a fact if it turned up at the conference, because they don't have facts turning up at their conference. They have lobbyists turning up at their conference. Yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. I think I'm going to leave it there for tonight. I've got loads more on this, but if you've got a Citizens Assembly coming up, I think the next one's in Birmingham, do get in touch. I've got all the documentation, by the way. It's all been sent to me. It's all got the stuff about sortition involved in my society. I've been sent it by somebody who has been chosen to be a panellist on a Citizens Assembly. So that's going to be interesting. We'll get inside information. If you want to book the real Citizens Assembly, do please get in touch through the website. I'll come down on my own, or we can do a whole day with Piers, Sandy and myself. We have got the bigger picture and it's very enjoyable. What we're going to do is go more into sections. This is what I do now with my talk. I put it into sections and we have a little Q&A. So in other words, the how, where, why and who is all split up so that we can look at it objectively and have a bit of a debate. And if you would like to come on to the show in the new year live, do a live stream. We're going to be doing, I think, on Wednesdays. Also, I'm doing a live stream with Eric Von Essex on the Eric Von Essex YouTube channel at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. I think that's going to be a regular. I know Eric's in chat there. So, yes, I think that's probably about it from me. And I'm really looking forward to these live streams and putting out some really good historical stuff. Please support us because we're going everywhere and we're doing as much as we can. So that's it from me. Thanks for listening And if you're not doing anything on Boxing Day, tune in at 9 p.m. I'll be doing a live stream. I should think it'll be on YouTube and all the other platforms. It won't be a radio show. So go to Windows on the World YouTube channel. I'll be advertising that over the next couple of days because it's nearly Christmas. So have a great holiday, everybody, and try and avoid the climate emergency. And I will see you all very soon. Good night. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.